Welcome back to the Crypto World channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now the Bitcoin price is still within this triangle pattern, waiting to see the next big move in the markets. But of course, that is not all. Later in the video, I will be going over the daily Bitcoin chart and discussing whether or not we're at a bottom here or whether we should expect some lower price targets coming into play. I'll also be covering the US dollar index later in the video. This is important for all investors out there, not just Bitcoin. And I'll also give you guys another quick update on the Bitcoin order books and the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, because right now we're seeing some very interesting signals. All of that and more in this video, so make sure you're watching all the way to the end so that you're not missing out on any of this valuable information. And just before we jump into it, make sure to drop a like down below on the video. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on for more updates just like this one every single day. And as always, I really do appreciate all of your support on the channel at the moment. I can't thank you guys enough. But anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's get straight to what this video is about. So right here, we're on the Bitcoin to US dollar chart on the 4-hour time frame. And yeah, once again, we're still forming this symmetrical triangle pattern, or this horizontal triangle pattern, as I discussed in yesterday's video. Obviously, we saw a small bounce along this support level, but we did actually see just a slight dip below the support level, but obviously no major break below. What we need to see when we're breaking an important level on the chart is preferably a spike or a surge in volume, and clearly we did not see any of that. We saw pretty flat volume. And so especially if we're not really seeing any volume coming in as we're breaking to the downside, what we would then need to see is a retest of the previous support level to confirm it as resistance and get a rejection to the downside like that. That is a confirmation method that I use, especially if we don't see that spike in volume. And so obviously we saw no confirmation once again, so that turned out to be just another bounce here to the upside. But obviously so far, at least at the time of filming this video, the Bitcoin price hasn't even made it up towards this line of resistance yet, which is showing that there's actually quite a lot of selling pressure in the market still. And obviously that's a given, considering the fact that we are still in this downtrend here on the 4-hourly time frame. We're clearly making lower highs and also lower lows on the chart. So obviously if we're breaking above resistance, yes, we can enter long positions, but just keep in mind it is a little bit more riskier to enter a long position in a downtrend. Obviously there has been times within this downtrend where you can make some money from long positions, but clearly from looking at short positions in a downtrend, you're going to be making more money than long positions. But obviously that's just in my short-term Bitcoin trading strategy. As far as my long-term Bitcoin strategy goes, the lower we go, the more I will accumulate Bitcoin for the longer term, because obviously the cheaper the Bitcoin price is, the more Bitcoin you can actually buy. And in the super long term, talking about years from now, I am extremely bullish on Bitcoin. No matter what happens in the short term over the next few days, weeks, or even months, that doesn't really change Bitcoin's long-term future over many years and even decades from now. Now bringing out the price oscillators here. First of all, in the RSI, we're pretty much heading sideways on the 4-hour chart, showing that there is weakness in this bounce to the upside here. And just keep in mind, the last time the RSI started to consolidate sideways and actually starts slightly heading back to the downside, that came right before another dump to the downside in the Bitcoin price. And of course, if you will subscribe to this channel all the way back here at this exact high, I was actually warning you guys of this next bearish price action days before it happens. And right now, obviously we're not seeing the exact same signals as what we saw last time, because last time around we saw that small bearish divergence on the chart. But just keep this in mind as well. We are showing a little bit of weakness in this bounce to the upside, and the MACD on this 4-hour time frame isn't really showing too much. As you can see, we're kind of flipping between bullish and bearish, but only very slight movements, so really not much momentum here in the short term. So right now, just in the imminent short term for Bitcoin, talking about perhaps the next few days, maybe the next 1 to 2 weeks, I am still leaning slightly more bearish just in that short term once again. But obviously none of that is really confirmed until we actually start breaking some of these support levels just here, because of course from where we are right now, there's still a possibility that we can break above resistance. So it's important to keep our options open. And right now, I'm not really trading Bitcoin until we actually break one of these significant levels on the chart. And now zooming out to the daily Bitcoin chart and focusing on the RSI, because this, believe it or not, is one of the most accurate indicators that I've been using myself as a part of my strategy. And how to use the RSI is pretty simple. If we're seeing some strong trends to the downside, that is usually warning us of some bearish price action that is coming next, especially if the price is still slightly heading to the upside while we're seeing a downtrend in the RSI. That is basically giving you a sell signal to kind of be prepared for some bearish price action. And of course, I was going over this exact same thing back here during the beginning of August leading into September, saying that the daily RSI was actually beginning this downtrend while the price was still slightly heading to the upside. So definitely be careful of that, of some bearish price action coming next. And so how can we actually use this to determine some bullish price action coming next? Well, obviously, if we're actually bottoming out here on the RSI and starting a new uptrend, that usually is a sign that we're bottoming out for the Bitcoin price. So the RSI on the daily time frame was actually one of the main indicators that I used all the way back here during May to actually be confident that this $30,000 price level was the bottom for Bitcoin. Obviously, a couple times during that time period there, I discussed, what would happen if we dropped a little bit lower, because technically speaking, anything's possible. But just the fact that the RSI reached these oversold levels back in the middle of May after that crash, and then the Bitcoin price started consolidating sideways while we started this uptrend in the RSI. Once again, they were all the signals that the market was bottoming out. And so right now we're approaching a market bottom. We're getting closer and closer, but we haven't really gotten there just yet. I'm not confident that this is a bottom right now, because once again, we haven't seen any of the signs like what we've seen previously when we've bottomed out. Even go back further and looking at other crashes during Bitcoin's price history. As you can see just here, we had a small dip to the downside, and just zooming in further, leading up to that dip just there, before we even saw the bearish price action, the daily RSI was warning us that we were going to see some bearish price action. And then as soon as we saw that actually play out and the Bitcoin price started consolidating sideways while we entered an uptrend in the daily RSI, that signaled the bottom for this correction. Going back even further, looking at the March 2020 capitulation, once again, we saw a strong daily downtrend in the RSI right into these oversold areas. And the moment we reached these oversold areas and started spiking to the upside again in the daily RSI, that signaled that we actually hit the bottom for the Bitcoin price. And going back further towards the end of 2019, as you can see, we reached this market bottom right as the RSI on the daily time frame was starting an uptrend. So I can go on and on about the RSI here on the daily time frame, and by now you should know that this is one of the most accurate indicators out there. Obviously, no indicator is 100% accurate, so keep that in mind as well. But yeah, I won't be confident that we've actually bottomed out here until we start seeing a little bit more of an uptrend in the daily RSI. So once again, we're approaching the bottom. We're getting closer towards the bottom of the RSI, but we're just not there yet. And now looking at the US dollar index on the daily time frame with the ticker of DXY. For the beginners out there, this is basically just showing us the strength of the US dollar. So if we're heading to the upside, obviously the US dollar is rising in value. But if we're heading to the downside, obviously the US dollar is losing value. And so what this means for Bitcoin and pretty much any investment that's tied to the US dollar, of course, when the US dollar is climbing to the upside, then that usually means that investments paired to the US dollar are losing value. Not always, but that's generally the case, especially when it comes to Bitcoin. And I'll show you some examples in just a moment. And of course, if the US dollar is losing value, then it's easier for investments such as Bitcoin paired against the US dollar to rise against the US dollar if the dollar's actually falling. So basically, the US dollar and Bitcoin kind of have an inverse correlation. Obviously, it's not a perfect inverse correlation, but it's pretty well inversely correlated during the major bull and bear markets of Bitcoin. For some examples, zooming all the way out here, this is still on the daily time frame, but zoomed all the way out, looking at this massive increase in the US dollar index that was actually during 2014 leading into the very beginning of 2015. And what was happening to the Bitcoin price during 2014, that time period just there? Well, we were actually in a major bear market for the Bitcoin price. And it was only after the US dollar stopped heading to the upside towards around the beginning to mid 2015 and leading into 2016 that we actually bottomed out for that huge 2014 to 2015 bear market. And now looking at this massive crash in the US dollar index, where was that? Well, that was during the entire year of 2017 when Bitcoin was on one of its biggest bull runs in its entire history. Once again, that was during the time where the US dollar was crashing to the downside. And where did the US dollar reach this bottom just here? Well, we actually bottomed out at the very beginning of 2018 when we entered the bear market for crypto. Not just Bitcoin, but pretty much all altcoins out there as well. Entered the 2018 bear market right here as the US dollar was bottoming out and starting to head to the upside. Once again, throughout this entire time period just here and this time period just here, Bitcoin and crypto were in bear markets. And then when we were heading to the downside in the US dollar, we were in a bull market. And now looking at more recent price history just here, throughout this entire time period just here, that was towards around the middle of 2020, leading right in towards around February 2021. And what happened to the Bitcoin price during that entire time period just there? Well, obviously we were pumping to the upside. We've been in a major bull market ever since around the second half of 2020. And it's only been over the past few months that Bitcoin started to look a little bit more bearish on the bigger picture. And of course, during those last few months where Bitcoin has been looking a little bit more bearish, the US dollar, on the other hand, has been looking a little bit more bullish. And so right now, the US dollar index is currently pumping to the upside. So this is actually not good for Bitcoin. Now, normally the US dollar rises to the upside as investors are jumping into cash due to perhaps uncertainty in the markets, such as the Evergrande situation, for example, or even because of talks of new tax laws and things like that. Once again, anytime we enter uncertainty in the market, that's just usually when a lot of investors out there jump into cash cash for safety. And so of course, if the demand for the US dollar is increasing, that's going to push up the value of the US dollar, which in turn is going to bring down any US dollar pairs, so such as Bitcoin versus the US dollar. So right now, I am actually keeping a close eye on what the US dollar index is doing right now, because once again, looking back throughout many years in history, anytime we've had huge upward spikes in the US dollar, that's usually meant a bear market for Bitcoin and crypto overall. So for any Bitcoin bulls out there, what you'll need to see is, of course, the US dollar starting to drop back to the downside. And something that could cause that happening is, of course, increased inflation, because obviously if inflation is running rampant in the US dollar, no one's going to be wanting to hold US dollars while your money is just getting inflated away. So that is, of course, going to bring down the value of US dollars and in turn pump up the price of anything paired against the US dollar. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors at play here, but those are just some of the few main ones to pay attention to. And just quickly checking out the Bitcoin order books across all of these exchanges, they haven't really changed since yesterday. Once again, we've got this huge amount of buy pressure below 39,500 US dollars. So even if Bitcoin starts dipping down towards 39,000 US dollars, that's when a lot of this buying pressure starts kicking in. And so of course, this will help support the Bitcoin price in those regions. And quickly checking out the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, right now we've got another day of extreme fear. Of course, we had extreme fear yesterday, as I mentioned in my last Bitcoin update. And also this time last week, we actually had one day where we dipped into extreme fear back then. So the fact that we're seeing a lot of extreme fear in the markets, this is actually making me a little bit more bullish for what's coming next over the next few weeks, maybe over the next month. We're very likely going to see amazing buying opportunities because historically speaking, once again, what we know from history and from all of the facts, data, and evidence in front of us, anytime we see extreme fear in the market, if you're using that as a long-term buying opportunity, pretty much every single time in Bitcoin's history, at least as far as this indicator goes back, these have been amazing buying opportunities to hold for the longer term. Obviously, that's not financial advice. This is just giving you the insight of my Bitcoin strategy. And of course, if you want to get these extra crypto updates throughout the day, make sure you're following me over on my Twitter. My official Twitter account is linked in the description down below if you want to stay up to date in these markets at all times. And if you enjoyed this video or got something valuable out of this video, make sure to leave a like down below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on for more updates just like this one. It costs you nothing to subscribe to this channel and it only takes a couple seconds out of your day. And as I just mentioned, by you clicking that subscribe button down below, you're going to be getting all of this valuable content every day. So I don't see why you wouldn't subscribe. And by the way, right now, there's never been a better time to share these videos around with your friends, considering the amazing opportunity that we are currently seeing in the markets. This opportunity does not come very often. So seriously, make sure you're sharing these videos around with your friends while you still can. And of course, there's never been a better time to stay active in these markets. But anyway, that's really everything I have to say for this video. Once again, I really hope you enjoyed and I'll see you all in the next video.